lovely people. Today we will take a deeper dive into how water bottles were made, from the plastic bottles we all used once and tossed to the eco-friendly, reusable designs that have become so popular. We'll step inside the factory and follow the entire process. It's fascinating how technology and creativity were working together to give us something we often take for granted. So, if you've ever wondered how that trusty water bottle in your hand was crafted, you're in the right place. Step 1. Designing the bottle. The journey began with design. Engineers and designers were brainstorming the perfect shape, size, and material for the water bottle. They were continuously sketching out designs and using software to create 3D models. Factories wanted to ensure that the bottles were not only functional, but also aesthetically pleasing. For reusable bottles, they were focusing on sleek, ergonomic designs, while disposable plastic bottles were being kept lightweight and simple. Each design was being refined based on customer preferences and needs. Once the design phase was completed, it was time to get into production. Step 2. Choosing the materials. When it comes to selecting the material, the factories were presented with a complex decision process depending on what kind of bottle was being produced. Disposables were primarily manufactured from PET plastic, polyethylene terephthalate, and reusable were made of stainless steel, aluminum, or BPA plastic. Originally, these factories were procuring these raw materials in bulk. Raw plastics for manufacturing disposable bottles were arrived in bulk at production houses, whereas metals for manufacturing reusable bottles were in the form of cut and bent according to the requirement. The type of material that is used played a big role in deciding just how hard-wearing or green the end product would be. Step 3. Molding the bottles. Production begins after the preparation of the materials. The production process commenced. Manufacturers were producing plastic bottles by injection molding process. The articles were heated and melted before being injected into molds that had the final shape of a bottle. This melted plastic was being poured in these molds and then allowed to cool to give the shape of the bottle. The specific characteristics of the molds were intended to provide a very high level of repeatability of bottles of various sizes and shapes. As for metal bottles, there was another story. The metals were being heated and then worked by industrial machines to construct a body of a hollow cylinder of the bottle. This metal forming process required a high level of heat and pressure in order to create the shape required for a reusable bottle. Step 4. Forming the bottle's neck and cap. Once the generalized shape of the body had been formed, the work on the neck and the cap could begin. Factories were continually refining this step to make sure when it was a reusable type bottle, it had that perfect closure. In the same case of the sweet-appearing plastic bottles, another machine was forming the bottleneck with a thread that enabled the cap to be screwed onto the vessel with enough tightness. They were developed concurrently. That is, a cap was being produced simultaneously with the bottle, in most cases being made from the same kind of plastic or metal as the container. Sometimes the reusable bottles had caps with O-ring, made from silicone, to ensure that there is no spillage. These caps also featured small knobs, such as flip-top spouts, or straw attachments for additional ease of use. Step 5. Assembling and testing. The assembling process then followed after the individual parts had been created. Employees at the factory were perpetually screwing caps, spouts, and any other appendages which could be added onto the body of the bottle. The position of the threading between the cap and bottle had to be very correct so that once screwed it was tight. But before these bottles left the factory, they were subjected to various tests using pressure. The factory said that leak tests for the reusable bottles involved filling them with water, then shaking the bottles to ensure that the cap and the bottleneck were tightly sealed. They were also conducting impact enhancement tests on the bottles made of plastic, as well as metallic ones, to determine their ability to handle an impact or drop without shattering. Step 6. Printing labels and branding. Once the bottles passed the quality control phase, it was time for the final touches. For disposable plastic bottles, this meant printing labels. Factories were using high-speed printers to apply brand logos, product information, and barcodes onto the bottle's surface. These labels were typically made from a thin layer of plastic that stuck to the bottle through heat or pressure. For reusable bottles, branding was often etched or printed directly onto the metal or plastic surface. Factories were customizing these bottles with different colors, textures, and logos to suit different markets and preferences. Reusable bottles often had stylish finishes, from glossy coats to matte textures, which made them stand out on store shelves. Step 7. Packaging and shipping. And after the bottles have been assembled, labeled, and tested, and now they are ready to be packed. Usually the plastic bottles were packed in bulk. They contained the bottles in plastic and stacked on pallets for transportation. Reusable bottles, in contrast, were typically shipped in smaller lots and were individually or in small groups, protected from impact during shipment. The bottles were then transported to the outlets where they were already oriented to help quench the thirst of millions of people everywhere. So, there you have it. Water bottles were crafted in factories with precision and care, from the initial design to the final packaging. Whether disposable or reusable, the manufacturing process made sure that each bottle was ready to meet our hydration needs. Let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating factory tours.